Rik Hart, Administrator of Central Coast Council. Thanks for speaking with Central Coast newspapers once again. Big meeting again last night, not quite as big as the month before. Kicking off, you had a couple of public speakers. One, Matthew Wales, spoke to your street banner thing, that is to say flags on the street banners. Could you say something about that first?
Yes, Matthew spoke very well, and he raised one very significant point which I was unaware of, and that is there is no flagpole for flying an Australian flag in the Umina retail precinct. So I have actually, as of this morning, actually asked the staff to go away, or in fact, I asked them in the council meeting last night to go away and actually see if they can find a site where a flagpole could be positioned so that a proper Australian flag can be flown there on the requisite days. So that was one point that I absolutely agreed with him on. Now, in fact, as far as the policy is concerned, the staff have put together a policy, and my job now is to put it out for consultation, which I've done. So it goes out for consultation, and I would again encourage people from the community to have a look at it. The issue that's sort of in contention is whether the Australian flag can be used as a banner. When you look at the federal protocols for flying the Australian flag, they're pretty clear about how you should fly it. One, you can't and shouldn't fly a flag that is dilapidated in any shape or format, is faded. It must actually be destroyed in a particular way, which is appropriate. It also, flags can only go up at dawn and must be taken down at dusk. And the only way they can stay up overnight is if they're properly illuminated. So there's a range of rules around it. That doesn't say you can't have a flag on a banner. But that's a little bit of the dilemma I think this council staff are in. And that's why I want to encourage people from the community to come back. Because if the community feel it's okay, well then, I don't have a particular issue against it. So we'll just wait and see what the community has to say on that one.
But you have recommended that you could have banners featuring part of the Australian flag,
correct,
up to 50% of the area. And you've also recommended an easier way for the community to put banners up and down, I understand.
Yes, absolutely. There's now the community or a community group can now design a banner, and as long as it meets appropriate guidelines, and they're fairly broad in that regard, then they'll pay for the banners, and we'll put them up and down. And there's a fee set in our fees and charges for that service. So that's fine, because we do want banners to be up and around. I mean, they add a lot of liveliness and sort of colour to streets and shopping precincts and so on. So really, we want to encourage that. So that's kind of the good side. As I said, the difficult one is when you want to fly an Australian flag and you're flying it not as purported as it should be flown, as it's now up and down, so to speak, and it's not of the correct dimensions. Now, I don't know how, the prelude to the document that the federal government talks about the old systems and it's how regarded it is and well regarded, and how there's protocols that have been steeped in the passage of time. So for flying a banner that looks like a flag, I'm not sure fits that. But let's see what the community wants to do at the end of the day. As I said, I'm not particularly hung up on myself personally, happy to sort of review it. So we'll see how the community comes back.
I'm sure the RSLs will have something to say about that. But moving on to other things, we'll go on to the other speaker. Joy Cooper spoke about the asset sales, which have been much talked about over the last few weeks. Could you take us through? There's a series of asset sales. I understand about $5 to $6 million worth of asset sales that happened at Doyalson and Batteau Bay. Her criticism was that some of those blocks of land sold for less than they were purchased in 2014. Could you take us through that?
Yep. So last night there was 2 blocks that came up which completed our asset sales program and brings the total to approximately $62 million, which was the magic number. So the 2 blocks there, the one that I think was that Joy referred to was in fact the Doyalson blocks. And when you look at it spells it out in the actual valuation, the Hill PDA valuation, which is attached, and the valuation puts the point forward. when the previous Wyong Council purchased the land, they purchased the land on the basis it could be rezoned to industrial. Now that's a critical piece of information, because if you're purchasing a bit of land for future industrial use, then you'll pay the appropriate price. So they paid $7 million. Now I can't comment on whether $7 million was appropriate as a price to pay if it was rezonable to that. 7 years later, when we come to sell it, that was no longer the case. It could only be sold on its highest and best use because of the heavy impost of all the environmental issues associated with the blocks, that could go into 4 lots of residential. And the value for the residential on a highest and best use was valued by the valuer at 5.5 million. We had 7 parties interested, bidding, if you like, through the real estate agent, and the top bid was 5.5 million. So that's what we sold it for. Right. So it's sold, if you like, under a different basis compared to what it was purchased under. And therefore, yes, it does show a loss. It's a book loss. But overall, if you look, and I've asked the staff to produce a paper for the next council meeting, which will list all the sales we've done for the whole 60 million in one place, so that can be kept as a record of the council's efforts in the sales program. So showing what the book value was, what we sold it for, and the sales methodology, auction or private treaty or whatever it might have been. So it's all clear, it's all there. And as I said, on that $62 million worth of sales, the book value is about 38 million of that land. We made a 63% profit on the book value. So in no way did we sell things at a fire sale or anything like that. Right.
Well, on to other things. There are a few other things that popped up last night. The financials, you might want to point out quickly. We're writing an article about the financial situation from last year. How do you? I'll open the mic to you right now. How did you think you're tracking?
Well, I have to say, after 20 months, which is why I went on a break in this gig here, and it's been a roller coaster ride of stuff. But I think what made really everything worthwhile was seeing a result at the end of the financial year, so 30th of June this year, just past the month, which was the month of June, which of course is also the year end, unaudited, but nonetheless won't vary that much, showing a $46 million surplus after all the successive losses, and showing a healthy balance of unrestricted cash at $120 odd million, and debt levels reduced by 50 odd million. Now, for a turnaround in 20 months, I'm feeling very comfortable with the team. And as I mentioned to you before we went on air, I think, David, the fact that the culture in the organisation is improving dramatically, and that whilst I was not around during the floods and David was indisposed through illness, the executive team actually managed to carry out the works according to the Leocom, which is the Chief Police Commander at Tuggerah Lakes, or Wyong, actually complimenting the staff on how well they performed. So to me, that's one of the greatest things that shows that we've really turned things around, not just financially, but the culture has started to turn around, where the executive team and the other staff, without the 2 senior leaders there, actually took over and made the things happen to where they're complemented by the Leocom himself.
So you think that's an indication that the biggest, as you mentioned before, the biggest challenge of council, the culture has changed, and therefore you may be able to attract the sort of people that you're going to need in the next few years?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think as you start to see that change occur, which it is quite clearly and being now demonstrated, you will see it becoming more an employer of choice. And we are starting to see people actually now start to want to join the organisation. And the fear factor has gone from inside the organisation. And I think having that annual result with that, locks it into people's mind, yeah, we've turned the corner and we're there. So really, David, hopefully, that the last time we need to talk about, the financial thing, we can now talk about, hopefully, how we are improving the way we do things and what are the innovative things that we can look at to actually improve the way we manage emergencies, such as we've just been talking about, and other major events. And also, can we get more attraction happening of jobs and businesses coming to invest here on the Central Coast? And there's still Gosford, which is still on top of my list of one day to be able to try and make some major progress for Gosford.
Well, that would be great. I know that you've got the library scheduled to, the regional library scheduled to start sometime shortly, and that will be, and you've got a new private developer who's taken over the key site in Man Street and Doyalson there. So we look forward to that. Now, look, while we're here, we are writing articles around about the dog policy. Now, you have the dog policy from the last council meeting out to hearing at the moment. There's been a lot of commentary about that. Have you got anything else to add about the upcoming dog policy?
The only thing I would do is still continue to encourage people to respond to it. We've had over 500 submissions, which is, what we expected. I mean, as they say, dogs are man's best friend, and certainly they're proving to be. But there are two sides to the equation. There's a lot of people who don't like dogs, particularly families with very young children, and they don't know whether to trust a dog or not. So there's two sides to a story. And overall, we're trying to provide more space for where dogs can be off leash, because we recognise the well-being of the dog is important as well. So we're looking for more areas, but maybe constraining in other areas. So really, it's out for consultation. The information will come back, and we'll take it on board and try and steer a middle course through it, which may prove difficult, but that we will attempt to steer a middle course through it.
Now, one last thing, the Risk and Audit Committee, you've got new membership of the Risk and Audit Committee. A lot of people apparently applied for these. They're pretty important and well-resourced roles. How did you go about selecting those individuals?
Right. Well, the first thing was we had to say goodbye to John Gordon, and John Gordon has been, a very probably one of the members who's contributes most over the period of time. And I've worked with John in other councils, and he's certainly one of the best in the game. So he's a big loss to us in that sense. So the policy, says that he has to move on and disappear. So that's fine. So we went to the recruitment phase. Now we did put out an application, applications, and we did get, I think, about 24 applicants, which is a good number of people who are interested. Bear in mind, we're strongly looking for a particular type of person to fit in with. We've got Carl there at the moment, and we've got two on board at the moment. Carl's the chair, and he's only got one more year. So we were looking for somebody, and then he has to go as well. So we're looking for someone who's got potential for chair, and also got good, strong financial and broad governance knowledge. So we were thinking about the mix we've got on that audit committee. So when we went through the first lot, and I was on the panel that was interviewing, there was some good people there, without doubt. But when it came down to what we were exactly looking for, we were struggling to find what we were looking for. So we then said, well, okay, we're going to close that part of the process. And in actual fact, we tossed, the members of the panel then tossed some names out. Carl was on the panel as the current chair. We tossed some names out, and he contacted a number of those names. And one of those we then did another interview with. And David Farmer, as the CEO, also did a separate interview with him. And on the basis of that, we appointed Peter McLean to the role. So that was the process we went through. And certainly in my view, he's got the experience, and he's precisely what we were looking for to fit that gap, and potentially as a chair down the track.
It's going to be a very important role with an incoming council in the future, no doubt. So that'll be
terribly important.
Yeah. All right. Look, I know you had a couple of grants that were awarded. You talked to the Terrigal Trotters and the Gosford Preschool, and you're also asking for these monthly grants for people who apply for these monthly grants, or organisations. Is that right?
Yeah. Look. I mentioned it last night. The grants program totally is $300,000, and we seem to struggle to get the money out the door. And particularly when we've got the money, it would be nice to get it out to deserving people in the community, or groups in the community. So I guess we've just got to, I can't remember exactly how much we've spent out of it, but we certainly have got quite a lot of change left over, so to speak. So I really would like to see not necessarily the criteria changed, but more help somehow has got to go to community groups to actually apply for the grants. They're probably deserving, but it's someone's got to do it. It is an effort. I mean, we've got probity things on our side which people have to meet, because obviously we just don't give it out per se. So somehow there must be a slightly more simplistic way which allows us to meet the criteria, them to meet the criteria, and we can actually go out and help some more of these groups. So yeah, a little bit disappointing we didn't get more money out, but that's what it is.
Well, so you're basically looking for some new directions to encourage people to apply. Is that right?
Absolutely, and I think we've got to somehow find a way to be able to assist them to apply, because it's one thing for them to be, to realise there's a grant available and they're possibly eligible, but then to complete a grant application is quite a lot of work, and we require that from a probity point of view, quite rightly so, I have to say. But nonetheless, it's an effort. So it's in there that I think we can probably do a little bit better in terms of helping people actually complete it, and then obviously hopefully treat it favourably.
Excellent. Well, look, that's all we've got. Anything you'd like to add?
No, David, I think as I said,
all right,
if we can forget about financial crises now and move on to other things.
All right.